Dan Lin is in talks to be the new quote unquote Kevin Feige for DC. And it's kind of funny because last week we were going to talk about how Greg Berlanti's name was being thrown into this, circus, if you will. And whereas I don't think Greg Berlanti should have been the new quote unquote Kevin Feige figure for DC, I did have some defending arguments for the man because I might as well just get into it now too before we get into the Dan Lin thing, because I'm going to do the same thing for Dan Lin that I intended on doing for Greg Berlanti. So we can do, just because Greg Berlanti's name was thrown into it first, we can compare the two. So I was going to say with the Greg Berlanti thing, and kind of the same thing applies with Dan Lin here, is that, I mean, it goes without saying that Greg Berlanti was he was responsible for all the CW shows, the Arrowverse. He's behind the Green Lantern show that may or may not even exist at this point. We still really have no idea. And obviously, all of these DC shows or these CW shows for the most part, were very campy, cheap television shows, but they were all good for what they were, right? I think that's safe to say. For the most part, they were all good. The first few seasons of Arrow were good. The first few seasons of Flash were good. I feel like all these shows had a good start. This is
Definitely.
safe to say. And I think ultimately the bad rap that comes with any of the Greg Berlanti ran shows is just that they were cheap. And I don't really think that it's 100% fair to blame their either failures or their lack of big budgets on Berlanti, because I feel like if he would have been given a movie sized budget, maybe he could have made a more cinematic experience, you know? I just don't know if it's really a fair assessment to say Greg Berlanti couldn't make something or produce something as good as a Marvel show or a Marvel movie or something, because he's never been given the budget and freedom to even attempt to do it. So
I'll just throw this out there. I thought it was spectacular. Anybody that watches those shows and was like, "Oh, this looks terrible. The budget's too small. This is first of all, go watch any superhero show from the 80s. Go watch the original Flash show from the 1990. Watch I don't know what there was a Superboy show, Adventures of Superboy show that was on network television for a little while. Heck, watch Lois and Clark. You can go to
I was gonna
HBO
say,
Max right now and watch Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. And look how cheesy that stuff was. It's all perspective with this crap. I'll tell you this: the Flash CW show had King Shark as a reoccurring character on their program. It was a completely CGI character. And I'm sorry, that thing looked just as good as She-Hulk does. I mean, it was just as believable. It was a giant walking king, shark humanoid as She-Hulk is to me. So I don't know. That's my little defense against calling those shows cheap. Plus,
well, they are cheap. That's the kind of the point. It's
I'm saying
they're made to be cheap.
Exactly. Well, but they're not cheap. They're not cheap by television standards. I don't think they're cheap by network television standards at all. I think that they hold up a hell of a lot better than sci-fi shows, the sci-fi network shows. Some of that
Earlier
stuff
sci-fi shows.
Okay.
Earlier ones.
Well, yeah,
maybe.
Early ones, yeah.
Because I mean, wasn't Battlestar on sci-fi? Battlestar was pretty decent. Then Battlestar Galactica was on sci-fi.
Battlestar was good. Yeah.
And then I never watched too much of it, but there was the Stargate shows. I don't know. Those were on par, I feel like, CG wise, but I feel like they shot a lot of that stuff on location, in all honesty, back then. Nevertheless, though, I agree with you in a different sense, because we're kind of preaching the same argument to some degree. I'm just coming at it from a different angle, because I'm saying these shows were cheap by design. He wasn't given MCU money to produce these
Yeah,
shows.
he was
Had
doing
he
the
been
best he
given,
could with what he had.
yeah, and I think that's for he didn't have the budget to buy like a writer who writes movies.
Film features, sure.
He didn't have the money to go get Steven Spielberg to come in and direct the shows. Like he had a TV budget. So I feel like it's not a fair assessment to judge the just the on-screen quality and even the writing quality, because like it's a CW writing too, so it's like they had to design these shows to work on the network they were on, which
Yeah.
made them have to be inherently even more campy and appeal to younger people, and it's a different thing. So I don't
Well,
think it's fair to say that he couldn't do the job of running DC, because he hasn't really been given like a true shot at doing
an
it.
opportunity, yeah. No,
So
I completely agree. I'm sorry. I just when people, because there, I'm not saying you, but there are other people out there that like I've told before in the past, like because the Flash used to be one of my favorite shows, and like I would tell people all the time, you got to watch it. Like I'm sorry, even if you don't really, if you're not into, like, I understand it's a superhero show and you're like that, but like I thought the writing was excellent on the Flash, especially those first like 3, maybe 4 seasons. I thought that they just did a great job. The first season of The Flash, I will put up against almost any other television series, like any other television. The hero's arc that Barry goes through, the stuff with Thawne, all that is just, it's phenomenal. The writing is just, I think the writing's excellent. But anyway, every time I would talk to somebody, like they'd roll their eyes and be like, "That's one of those CW shows, isn't it?" It's like, yeah, yeah, but it's like I get it. I understand where you're coming from, but like perspective wise, this is actually really good. Like,
for what it was good, and I agree with the first. Like I stand by what I said off the top. Like all of the CW produced shows, I feel like all started strong. Like they
mhm.
all had good, like 1 to 4 seasons at most, I'd say, honestly. Because I only after like 2 or 3 seasons of Flash, I can't remember what it was, it got really repetitive. It was always just like, "Well, who's the new speedster that's gonna
And he's
threaten Bay?"
fighting. Yep,
Yeah, it's just and it was just
that was a problem.
rinse, repeat, and then Arrow just got bad after the 3rd season. I mean, really, the first 2 seasons of Arrow, I contend, are substantially better than any of The Flash, honestly. The first 2 seasons of Arrow were fucking good. Like,
We'll have to disagree on that.
dude, they
'Cause
were really good. Like, I remember when that stuff first came out, I was literally kinda like you're saying you could put it up against things. I remember my young, naive mind when the first season of Arrow came out, I thought that shit was like HBO quality shit. Like, I'm not even kidding. I really
yeah, it
liked
was
it for
great.
whatever reason. It was like it seemed like it was dark. I mean, it had its cheesy moments, obviously, but it was a lot more serious than, I mean, anything else that was on CW, that's for sure. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I thought, and then the 2nd season with Deathstroke, I think they
Oh
didn't
yeah.
really end well, but it was, like, really good. Like, I thought it was great, and then the 3rd season with Roz, it was like, "Eh." And I think Arrow had the problem, not quite the same problem as Flash having to just fight speedsters over and over again. Arrow had the problem of, you're not Batman. Like, everything they were doing was just like, they made Green Arrow Batman. Like, that's what that show was, so I don't know if, like, it worked, but I feel like that was always a problem that, like, the show kinda ultimately had, because it, like, was trying to be something that it kinda inherently wasn't, and to some degree, like, even, like, with, like, Ra's al Ghul and, like, Deathstroke, it's like Batman villains and Teen Titans villains, like, like, but whatever. So, in all fairness, though, the main thing I was gonna do back with the Greg Berlanti thing, and then with the Dan Lin thing, obviously, because Dan Lin is now in talks to be like the guy, and supposedly, um, Alan Horn is like backing this choice,
Yep.
which is interesting. And
And it
he,
sounds like he may have even brought him to Zaslav's attention. Is that how you say his name?
yeah, Zaslav, or I don't
Zaslav.
even, I always
Yeah.
say Zaslav. I don't know if it's Zaslav though. It may or may not be, but nevertheless. They both, if you look at both Greg Berlanti and dude's
Dan Lin. Dan
Dan
Lin.
Lin's IMDb, they actually, I mean, you got to give them some credit for the things that they have done. Whether or not like you like them all that much, they've actually been successful, right? So let's go through and look at some of this. There's some stuff here for Greg Berlanti that obviously is not all that appealing as far as what I would consider top tier television, like Riverdale. But nevertheless, that one episode of Green Lantern, supposedly, Superman and Lois, have you been keeping up with that?
So I watched the first season and I loved it. I have not gotten a chance to watch the second season yet.
Same. It's on HBO Max now, though. So
Yeah,
if
that'll make it much more convenient to watch. But I really want to get back to that.
yeah, I like the first season. You got the Flight Attendant, which actually is an HBO series. So Berlanti actually like that was something that who knows how involved he was. But then you got like Batwoman. That's not. I did not get into that show. Whatever the hell Justice U is.
So I don't know what to. I feel like I'm curious what his executive producer. I really wish we knew how much. I feel like when it says executive producer, I'm not sure if that means he's more involved or less involved, but um,
It's
I feel like
nebulous.
I feel like they've attached him to every DC property. It doesn't matter what it is. They've just brought him in and said, "Hey, will you be executive producer on this?" I don't know if that's a simple matter of him, you know, sitting in on the showrunner interviews and like trying to being like, "Yeah, this guy can piece a story together or break a story, down by episodes properly, just because he has that experience doing that, and like that, so then that gets him the executive producer credit or whatever. But yeah, so even like Batwoman, like yeah, I understand like not everybody's cup of tea. I thought the first season was okay. I didn't watch anything past that, but I'm not sure what. I can't believe he had that much involvement with that.
Yeah, and that's the problem too, is like producer is such a nebulous term these days.
Yeah,
Like Steven Spielberg was a producer on the Transformers movies.
exactly.
He didn't do anything on those movies. He just had a meeting with
Yeah,
somebody at one point and they offered him a producer credit. And with putting Spielberg as a producer on your movie was more beneficial for the studio than it was for Steven Spielberg.
sure.
It was like, well, can we put your name on this? And it's, sure, why not?
Well, you just as you were scrolling, I noticed something. So I just got done saying that The Flash, the first season of The Flash, I'd put up against almost any kind of television, any series on television ever. Like I love it that much. That's like Game of Thrones season one. Like I'd put The Flash season one up against Game of Thrones, and I may pick The Flash as a better one for me than that. But then right here, he's also so he was very involved with The Flash. He's also been involved with the Titans TV show, which I absolutely hate. I hate with a
Terrible
passion.
show.
I watch it and it's so bad, and I continue to watch it because I keep praying that they'll get it fixed, and they just don't, and they piss me off every time. But
Yeah, that show is so bizarre because I'm the same way. Like, I do not like the show and I hate watching it every time I watch it. But, like, every once in a while, there's like a good scene.
yes,
So then I'm like, okay, I guess that was fine. But then it
plus
just, ugh.
Crypto's like one of my top five favorite comic characters ever. I mean, he's a dog, which I love, and then he's got Superman's power. Like it's just, I know it's hokey, but I love it. And they've got a live action Crypto on it, so like, fine, you guys got me. I'll watch your stupid show that's awful, that's poorly written, that makes no sense. But damn it, I'm not going to be happy about it.
Here we go.
There we go.
Writer credits.
Yep.
Green Lantern. Probably, I guess, every. There you go. See, it's all over. Here's the thing. You,
Yep.
though, this show, I will contend to you, is 10 times better than The Flash. 1000%. This is his
It's a good
best
show too.
work.
I
That
like that
is
show
his
too.
best
But
work for sure. Better than Arrow, better than that shit. Way better. So I didn't even know he was really super involved in that. And since he's actually written, I didn't know he wrote it. And he's the creator of the show.
creator, yeah,
So that's good. That's his first, actually that's the first major win I would give him outside of CW stuff.
yeah.
And outside of DC stuff in general, because that was the thing I was kind of hoping to see, like, well, what has he done outside of the CW stuff? And really, or the DC stuff in particular again. And really, he hasn't like there's stuff on here, but it's surprising to see how much of his career really has been spent on the CW DC stuff. In all
Well,
honesty,
I think Arrow was so big, and then of course you then got Flash and Supergirl out of that, and those were so popular at one point. I think it kind of what's the word that when he was typecast. I mean, obviously he wasn't cast, but he was typecast as the DC guy at that point. And I think since then it's been a lot of DC stuff. He's had a hard time branching out to other stuff because he's probably been so busy juggling all the various. I mean, look at all the there's 15 different DC properties on there, I bet.
oh yeah. And then surprisingly though, like, and I had no idea about this. He's been writing for a long time. He wrote episodes of Dawson's Creek.
Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, hey, like I said, judge him for the success more so than what you see on screen because he's only been given a TV budget. So I feel like what he's at least been able to crank out, commendable career, I would
Yeah.
say. There's definitely some things I liked, some things I definitely don't like, but nevertheless,
Here's the other thing I think is both good and bad. He seems to be the kind of guy who will accept limitations. So like if they come to him, they're like, we want to do a, for lack of a better way to put it, let's say they wanted to do a Batgirl movie. And they were like, we want to do a Batgirl movie, but we only want to spend $100 million on it. And he'd be like, and it would be a movie. And most people would be like, yeah, we need 200 million to do it. He'd be like, okay, I'll find a way to do it for 100 million. I feel like he found a way to do all these things on the budgets he was given instead of being the kind of guy that's like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misjudging him, but I feel like he works
I
well within
agree with
limitations.
that though. No, I agree with that. He definitely, I think, given what he was given, he definitely did the best he could do, especially with working in the constraints of like making them CW shows on top of being decent DC superhero shows. Like, I
Yeah.
think he found a way to pull that off. And on top of that, having a smaller budget, right? Having a TV budget, doing all that on such a small budget, I think alone is commendable. Now, let's look at Dan Lin. Let's do some comparison here. See, I didn't know much about old Dan Lin, but he's apparently been around for a while too. He, I guess, started as like a lowly like production assistant at some point too. I think with Alan Horn at some point. Alan Horn was able to like see him rise pretty much to where he's at now, and he runs his own studio now too, his own production company rather. But he produced like Lego Batman 2, and this is another thing too. He has as a production company, so he's gonna be listed as producer on probably everything. So it's all always hard to see how much was, like, he actually involved in any of this, but we're also kind of trying to look at, like, you have to keep in mind we're kind of looking at who should run the company, not write the movies. So his
Mhm.
job, or Greg Berlanti's job in this case, the Kevin Feige of DC, their job would be to pick the best people to create the best content with their IP. So in that instance, I really don't have an opinion on who would do it better, really. I don't know much about Dan Lin, but I mean, he was an executive producer on Godzilla vs. Kong. He's producing the Walker TV series. He made that Easter Sunday movie that just came out, which I hear is god awful. So that's not very promising. But then Lego
Yeah.
Batman 2, the new
Yeah, but
Avatar: The Last
Lego
Airbender series.
that Lego Batman 2, I think that's just a holdover. I don't think anybody's updated that because I'm pretty sure that got canceled.
It probably did because that movie somehow didn't make, like, any money.
The first one?
Yeah.
First one made 311 million, it said.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The Lego movie made $1 billion.
Yeah.
So the 300 million that the Lego Batman movie made was
Yeah.
quite disappointing. So they scrapped it. But he was producer on the new Aladdin movie, Lethal Weapon TV
Well,
series.
and It too. He was a producer on the It, which was a big win for
Yep, it
Warner
and it too.
Brothers, I think.
But then there was Death Note, which was not good. The Frequency TV series. Never watched it, but I love the Frequency movie.
There is nothing on this list so far, though, that makes me go, "Oh wow, this guy really can land some." The Departed. There you
I
go.
was gonna say
It's
you got The Departed
uncredited,
there.
uncredited, but like Terminator Salvation, eh.
See, this must have been when he was like in his like younger years, obviously. Like he didn't have his own production company yet, but now he
Mhm.
does. I don't know. He's got the benefit that he has is that he's got a lot of production experience in general, right? He's got
In both
that.
TV and movies too. So if they want
Yeah.
somebody to be able to juggle both arenas, that I mean, obviously he would be good at that. It looks like.
Yeah, and that is what the article said that this person, which is interesting, but this person that they're looking for would take over all of DC and only he would report directly to David Zaslav and have no other middle management. So
Mhm,
DC would become its own thing, just like Marvel is, and they would have no overhead other than the CEO.
mhm.
That's a pretty big deal.
Sure.
So that's like no matter who gets the gig, that's compelling for I mean, a DC fan, I would think. I mean, that's what DC has deserved for forever at this point. Like, I feel like DC's the most. That's one thing about Kevin about the Zaslav that I can never take away from him because no matter what he does, he recognizes that. That was like the main one of the main things he said when he came in is that like, and he proved it with like axing Batgirl and eating $90 million. Like DC is our most valuable property. Like we need to make it actually be valuable to and for us if it's our
Sure.
most valuable property. So it's promising. If you had to pick one of these guys, who would you pick? Would you pick Berlanti, Lin, somebody else? What do you think?
I mean,
It could be
I
someone
guess
else too.
I guess I either Dan. I don't know. I'm trying to think of production people out there that like Kathleen Kennedy. Like maybe I don't like some of the Star Wars decisions that have been made, but she's definitely done well as a
Oh
producer.
yeah.
I mean, she did Harry Potter, right? And then that led her. They took her from Harry Potter. Disney hired her off of that to do um, Star Wars, and she's definitely been successful with it. Um, so her name would be interesting to me if I heard it. Um,
People
but
forget that George Lucas handpicked Kathleen Kennedy when he sold the Lucasfilm and Star Wars to old Papa Iger. It was
really,
his, yeah, it was
she was
his
his
thing.
pick.
It's like that's you gotta have Kathy run it. That was
Okay,
his
I'm
thing.
not sure I ever knew that, but yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure she did. But I
Dude,
just, I'm not tied into Hollywood stuff enough to know like big producers and stuff. I mean, obviously, like there's pie in the sky things like
I mean,
Spielberg.
I would be interested for someone if they were to name Kathleen Kennedy. I'd be like, that's interesting, but I feel like she was a better producer than the head of a studio because she hasn't done all that well being the head of Lucasfilm. Like, that's
Yeah.
my only concern because she went
Well,
from
so
being one of the world's best producers, like, there's no question about that. But
yeah,
ever since she started running a studio, it's been a little incoherent. Like,
yeah.
the
The
sequel
quality's been all
trilogy,
over the
yeah,
place.
and it's just like
Terrible.
there was you made a sequel trilogy of Star Wars, but you didn't even have the roadmap for it. You just
No.
literally hired 3 different people, 3 different writers to tell
Come up with three
individual
different
stories.
stories.
Yeah, but it's all supposed to be connected in this big like, no. No, 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 no. Like, stop. That's not how you do
Yeah.
it. 'Cause
Yeah.
you can do that for every other movie you make, but not when you're making something that's supposed to be a trilogy. There has to be some cohesion to it, not like this mismatch of tones and storylines and characters doing God knows what.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
but at the same time, to be fair, she did make Mando happen. She made Rogue One happen. And then we got Andor out of all of that. She paired Dave Filoni with Jon Favreau when Favreau pitched her the idea of Mandalorian. So she's had some success at Lucasfilm, no doubt. No one wants to give her credit for the wins. They only want to give her the bad stuff. Rightfully so. They should definitely hear about the bad stuff. But yeah, we got to give them credit for the good stuff too. You got. It's only fair. You're gonna kick them while they're down. You might as well tip them too. So
I'm trying.
I don't know.
I'm trying to see what other names have been thrown out there as possible ones for. I mean, this, like I said, this guy, like, there's this Dan Lin guy. There's nothing on his list that makes me. There's nothing we saw on that IMDb page that makes me go, "Wow, this guy really nails the project that he works on." Because the first Lego movie did excellent, but then that series dropped off a cliff real fast. And the same goes. Well, I mean, that did well. But there's not like he was a producer on Aladdin. Like, okay, live action Aladdin was going to do well no matter what. Like, I'm not sure that that's his involvement. I don't know. Godzilla versus Kong was good. It was definitely better than Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Which he was also part of.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's there's nothing that stands out on that list that makes me go,
Well,
like I
the
said,
Sherlock Holmes movies,
yeah. Again,
the
they're good.
Downies, but then there's
They're
also
good.
Gangster Squad.
Yeah.
So it is very hit and miss. I would say at the very least,
But then what did Kevin Feige do before he did Marvel? Like, I don't
he
know what he did. He's not known for.
he produced like every Marvel movie. Like
Well,
even
no,
before
sure,
then.
sure.
That's like the thing though. That like he for heading Marvel, that makes sense. Because it
Yeah.
was every Marvel movie. Because you could say, well, how come Greg Berlanti doesn't make sense? Well, he hasn't produced any movies. That's the big
Yeah.
difference.
Well, except for the fact that he did the worst the Green Lantern movie, which he was involved with.
That's not a good
That's
point.
a warning sign.
Exactly.
That's
Well, like yeah,
so yeah,
ever since
X-Men,
the original
Spider-Man,
X-Men,
Daredevil. Yep.
he was a part of like every single Marvel movie leading up to him taking over Marvel, so it fits
Sure.
very well. So that's the problem though. That's the inherent problem with trying to find a Kevin Feige. There is no Kevin Feige other than Kevin Feige.
Yeah.
So short of my pick for running DC would be Kevin Feige. Like he's done everything he can do at Marvel, so he should just leave and come fix DC, and then he can retire. He can be Thanos. He could literally what he could do. The most ultimate thing Kevin Feige could possibly do is build Marvel up to like the height of its success. Leave so it crumbles and fails, but he leaves for DC and brings it up to the height of success. So then when he retires, it fails. So he literally becomes Thanos. He watched the sunset on a grateful universe because he brought Marvel to the top and then killed it. And then he brought DC to the top and then killed it. And then he
You
could
know who I
do
want?
the same for Star Wars. Who else?
You know who I want? I
Who?
want David Goyer. David Goyer.
David Goyer?
David Goyer.
That's your pick?
That's my pick.
I think his name was out there for a little bit. I mean, he's worked on a lot of these big movies.
I mean, he wrote the Dark Knight series. He's written a lot of comics, and the comics he's written have been excellent. He's worked on Sandman, which is supposed to be really good. I haven't gotten a chance to watch that yet.
It's good.
He has some misses. There's definitely some misses in his list, but there's also some huge wins. And I think the misses have more to do with other people that were involved and his involvement. And so, yeah, I went Goyer.
My only worry with Goyer is that he's not a producer. He's a writer.
Sure.
That would be my biggest worry. I mean, he does have producing credits, but I feel like maybe these are things that he's had a long career, so now he's able to write and produce things because he can financially do it.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like that probably has some part in it. Because well, I mean, I don't know. He could have been able to write these and get. That's the problem with a producer credit. Again, it's so nebulous. Like, they could have just like given him a producer credit because he wrote it.
And
Like,
look at the
you
things
could
that
negotiate that.
like the Blade Trinity. All right, Blade Trinity was him trying to be a director for the first time, and he clearly effed that up. But he also wrote the first Blade movie, which is phenomenal, and the second Blade movie, which is very good.
Oh, Blade
So
2 is better than Blade 1, dude. What are you
you
talking
think
about?
so?
Oh yeah.
I could see that. I could see that. It's been a while since I have to go back and watch them, but like, and then there's like, like he wrote the Nick Fury TV movie with Hasselhoff, which obviously wasn't great. So like I said, there's some misses in there, but again, like there's some huge wins, and I think the potential of him. I think the potential of him is very big to do something special with it.
It's possible. The only thing I would see is I kind of look at him, like I said, with the writer, primarily being a writer is one thing, and because he's a writer and an artist in that sense, I look at him kind of the same way I look at a Jon Favreau and even a Dave Filoni, because people always throw like their names out to who should head Lucasfilm, and I think the problem is like they don't want to run Lucasfilm, and they're artists, they want to create the stuff. So that's like the only disconnect I could see is like maybe he doesn't want it on top of like he's not a producer. He's like continuously writing. So Favreau's directing and writing and Filoni and whatever. Maybe one day they could all do it. I don't know. It's not a bad pick though. I feel like if they picked David Goyer on paper, that would kind of make sense.
Yeah.
So I think like there's a good mix of like I think those are three good names you could throw out there that all kind of make sense. And if you picked one, I don't really know if you'd be better off than the other. I would have to say that probably Berlanti would be, even though I spent a while defending him, I don't think I would pick him just because he hasn't
Here,
done the movie stuff in general. But everyone needs the chance.
here's the thing. Like I was like you said, I was Berlanti and Lin. I was okay with up until you showed me Kevin Feige's production credits. Knowing that Kevin Feige's history has all been tied to Marvel, Kevin Feige to me has what you need in this job, which is an understanding of the characters, an understanding of the essence of the characters. You don't want to bring somebody in who doesn't understand what these characters are and know who these characters are at their core. The reason that they've been successful for 60, 70, 80, a century now. Like you don't want somebody to bring somebody in that just recognizes that they're popular and tries to figure it out on the fly. You want somebody that inherently understands what makes the essence of these characters popular and doesn't try to change that or manipulate that for whatever trend or whatever. I think that's the one thing that Marvel has done so well is like they just do the characters and they do them justice and they do them right. They stay true to the roots, which then you have the comic fans buying in. And if you know why they've existed this long, then you can tap into the audience that isn't fans and show them that and they'll latch onto that.
I would agree with that because that is like kind of the problem with. I mean, that's what happens. But that's when you people come in to make a movie like this with these kind of characters that don't understand the characters themselves. You get things like Halle Berry's Catwoman.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
that's what happens. It's like,
You
well,
get
you get shit because they don't know what they're making. Like they're just it's a Catwoman, and they just make that. They don't
Yeah.
know though. That's a very
You
fair point.
Yeah, you get things like, and I know that this is a very divisive movie among comic book people, but you get things like Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice. That I will say that the director's cut of that, the theatrical cut, was garbage. It was absolute trash. Like, I'm not even sure why Warner Brothers released that. Zack Snyder didn't make a movie that could be 2 hours, and to force him to do that was just ridiculous. I mean, nothing in that movie made any sense. The director's cut is a very good movie, just as Zack Snyder's Justice League movie, a very good movie. But inherently, the problem I think with Batman versus Superman was that Batman, the essence of Batman was completely lost in that movie. Like, they showed you a Batman that nobody knew anything about, that nobody had ever seen, because he was at a different point in his career, and but they didn't earn that different look at that bear. They didn't look at they didn't earn a Batman that was beaten down by life and, had lost his soul to whatever. They didn't earn that. They just threw it on there and was like, here's Batman. And so it didn't work for a lot of people, myself included. And I think that that's, to try and make those jumps without earning them, is what turns a lot of people off. And that's where Marvel is able to do things like, do Civil War and have it make sense and have some attachment to it, because they do all the work building up to it. They have the essence of they've established who Captain America is up until that point. So when Captain America turns against S.H.I.E.L.D. and turns against the U.S. government or whatever, or doesn't appear to be on board with the U.S. government, it's not like, oh man, Cap is anti-American. It's like, no, Cap's being who Cap is. Like, it works. It still feels like Captain America. So, yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying I feel like it's important to have somebody that understands who the characters are.
My one argument against that for the Ben Affleck Batman part is that, as a comic book person and someone who knows Batman, so this is coming from someone who's in the know, it completely worked for me because I can jump on board with any iteration of Batman and be completely on board with it. Like, I know Batman, so like coming into that version of Batman didn't throw me for a loop. It's just I'm watching Batman, and this is Batman. I didn't need setup for it because I
But
got
you,
it
but you've also,
immediately.
but you've also read 100 different Elseworlds tales that
Oh
envision
yeah, so
Batman as
it
somebody
worked for
different.
me.
You
Yeah.
you've seen Frank Miller's The Dark Knight series, where it portrays an older Batman that's gone through, like, that's fine, that's great. Like, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, from a general audience, that's not, those versions of Batman are exactly that. They're versions of Batman. They're not the core character. They're not the classic timeless version of the character that most people know and expect going into a film. And I think you can do that. You can take Batman and make him that later on for a wider audience if you want, but you have to earn those changes. You have to earn that different iteration of it and show the audience why he's that way. You can't just tell them, "Oh, this is just Batman now." Like, because most people have some idea, regardless if they're into comics or not. They have some tangential idea of who Batman is, of who Superman is, of who Captain America is. Yeah, they feel like they have an idea of this just by being around in pop culture.
Right.
So you have to give them that and then earn those changes if you want to make them. And I
I
think
would
that's
the other argument I have against that though is because people think that way is the reason why we haven't got Man of Steel 2 and people didn't like Man of Steel. It's because it wasn't Christopher Reeve's Superman. It wasn't the Superman they expected. It was all this that it wasn't what we like. But it was a good movie, and it was a great Superman movie, and it was the best Superman movie, and you're too caught up in your own head about what you think Superman should be, and you're not just looking at what you got and taking it for what it is. Like, that's like the same it's a sum cost fallacy or whatever the saying is. Like, it's like you're never gonna be happy at that point. Just like you
yeah.
just gotta accept things for what they are. I do agree though that that Ben Affleck Batman, although I think they set it up beautifully with the intro and him seeing the destruction, like starting it with him on the ground during those events in Man of Steel, pretty much tells you all you need to know. When he looks up at Superman and Zod fighting and destroying the city as he's holding that kid, you get it. You're like, yeah, this makes sense. That's a bad guy to him. Yep,
No, no,
I can
no,
totally see
no,
that.
no. I'm not arguing that aspect of it. That aspect of it, I completely. Yes, they did a great job establishing why he would be concerned about Superman and
Yeah,
why he would go after Superman. My thing was the ultra violent Batman that gets shown later on. The Batman that has been unhinged and unleashed and is there just to maim and kill criminals is not the Batman that most people are. And I understand why. Theoretically, on paper, I understand why. He lost Robin. The Joker has put him through.
it would have
He
been
even
better
says
if
to
we saw
Alfred,
that. Yeah,
he even says to Alfred, like, how many people have we lost? How many people? So obviously there has been a ton of stuff. Wayne Manor is in ruins. He's lost his his home, his parents' home. Like clearly a lot of really terrible stuff has happened to him. But we don't see that. We don't earn that Batman. So for him to
right.
just show up and be this ultra violent Punisher-esque vigilante, again, it didn't feel earned. I think that's where a lot of the divisiveness of that movie and the characters comes in. So I feel it's important that you have someone like Kevin Feige that understands the essence of what has made these characters timeless and can tap into that. And then where you want to take the story from there, that's fine. But you need to get that down first.
Do you think though that like I think there's an argument to be made that both should kind of exist because we wouldn't get movies like Logan if everyone went with like that mentality is my fear. We wouldn't get movies like Joker. They're like, well, we can't make this essentially Elseworld, like literally an Elseworlds Joker movie or the Batman. We wouldn't get any of this stuff because like, well, it's just not what the general audience is gonna want, so we can't do
Well,
it.
but
That's
with
my
Logan,
fear.
I would argue with Logan, they built to that, so that's fine.
And a
Like if you wanted
capacity.
to, they you had a history there of that character on screen that you could then get him to that point. So I feel like that. As far as Joker goes, like that's fine. If you want to do one-offs, that's fine. But if you're going to build a cinematic universe that is tied together, and you want people to buy in and invest in these characters for a long haul, for a journey, then I think you need to find somebody that understands what has made them popular for so long and bring that to life on the screen.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It would definitely I do agree with in the sense that the whole the whole DC universe has been so mismanaged, like in general. And like Zack Snyder, like you said, he got kind of screwed over on both counts. So like we
Yeah.
don't even know what his real vision would have ended up being because it
Well,
could
and
have went in
to be
reverse with Batman, and it kind of did. We met him at this dark time, but then once the Martha scene happened, he like found hope again, and
well,
he
and to
was
be
like,
fair,
it was
to
just
be
like starting here and going there.
to be fair, completely fair to Zack Snyder, I personally feel like had Zack Snyder been made the Kevin Feige of the DCU back when Man of Steel came out, if DC had not lost their ever loving minds when they saw Avengers make $1 billion and decide that they had to have a Justice League movie today.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah, right now. Like, I don't believe that Zack's original vision coming out of Man of Steel was to do Batman versus Superman.
Yeah, I doubt it.
I think the studio came to him and said, "Hey, look, we've got the Superman movie that you've started, this Superman franchise that's just fresh off the ground. We need a Justice League movie. How do we get there? How can you get us there in the next 3 years? How can you get us there in the next, 2 years? Like what can we do?" And Zach was like, "Okay, well, if that's the case, then this is the things we have to do. If I only have one movie to get us from Man of Steel to Justice League, this is what we have to do." And so, but had he been made the Kevin Feige and had he been able to introduce Man of Steel and then introduce just his Batman and then introduce just his Flash and have those 5 or 6 individual films build to a Justice League movie with all those characters introduced on their own, who knows what we'd be watching. Maybe we'd be watching, Justice League Part 2 and Superman and the crew taking on Darkseid. Like maybe that would be the case right now because it had been built organically and naturally, but because DC and WB lost their ever-loving minds, this is where we are.
You know what we'd have right now? Ben Affleck's directed, starring in versus Deathstroke Batman movie. Like, come on.
Phenomenal. Like,
I want that movie. Like, if they're gonna do, because I hope they continue to do, no matter who they put in charge, they should have a shared cinematic universe and Elseworlds movies, because that separates them from Marvel and doesn't tie down everybody they want to hire to be part of a shared cinematic universe.
Sure, because you're not going to get people like Todd Phillips, and you're not going to get people like Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Be in these films unless you're going to give them creative artistic freedom with them.
Yeah, and I would like to see those stories too.
Yeah, definitely. I am 100% on board for that. I'm just saying, for this particular person, for this job to build a cinematic universe, that's my hope, is that they have somebody that has that.
No, you have to have somebody to have that, because especially when you're not just heading a random production, like you're gonna be in charge of DC television, film, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So like you gotta understand the characters and what the shit is if you're gonna be like the guy greenlighting the shows, the guy greenlighting, or even not even just greenlighting, literally deciding on what to make in general. Whether or not like he comes up with an entire roadmap himself, or if he just has an open door pitch policy for a while to take ideas. He's got to shove everything together and make something cohesive out of it. So, like, kind of need to know what's going on. Kind of need to know what's going on. So, I'm curious to see. I guess, I don't know. We'll just have to see. It seems like Dan Lin's going to be the guy, though. So, I mean, since Alan Horn is there whispering in Zaslav's ear, and this guy is being recommended by Alan Horn, I see it being him. So, I'm very iffy on it. You know what would be a real shame? If Zaslav has his big 10-year plan to get DC back on track, and these next 10 years are like just is even worse than, like, what do you think happens to DC if these next 10 years are just as quote unquote bad, if not worse?
To be honest, I mean, if the next 10 years are worse, then I think if the next 10 years go as bad as the past 10 years in terms of hit and misses, like with one hit for every 5 misses, then I think you're going to end up, and maybe ultimately this wouldn't be a bad thing, but I could see Warner Brothers Discovery, especially as money conscious as Zaslav appears to be, he could sell them off to Disney, which ultimately may not be the worst thing in the world, but
that would keep Kevin Feige around Disney.
Yeah,
that would keep him around.
If in 10 years Disney has Disney owns DC, and you have a DC universe running parallel to a Marvel universe, and then you get the ultimate comic dream, which is integration of the two universes.
Yeah.
Then
it
would be insane.
I don't think a DC versus Marvel movie would ever happen, but if it were to happen, them being owned by Disney,
that would be the way it happens.
That would be how it happens. Absolutely. Yeah. I would totally see Kevin Feige sticking around at Disney to head up DC, because then they could like put Marvel on the back burner, so to say, for a bit and focus on DC, and it wouldn't hurt them in any way. Like it's their money. Like they wouldn't have to pump out all this Marvel content left and right, which to some degree has been very hit and miss since they started doing it. I think it's safe to say. Definitely Marvel hasn't been of peak quality since it was at the beginning, as it is now. Like, there was really no Marvel divisiveness up until this latter half when they've been pumping out so much content. And it's because Kevin Feige's so split. Like, he just...
Well, and I think
he's being pulled too many different directions.
I'm giving, there's that aspect that's a little troubling. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, though. I mean, we're also not that far removed from the pandemic when everybody was thrown into disarray and like nobody knew what they were doing or how work was going to be done post pandemic. And then you also had the integration of the Disney Plus platform into what they were doing already, and him trying to figure out how to, basically please two masters, the film side and now the streaming side. So yeah, definitely there's been some ups and downs. But I'm willing to give them, based on their hits, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and see if, when we get to phase 5, we don't see some course correction there.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I've still liked all of the Marvel stuff, even though like I've been disappointed by a lot of it. The good has still outweighed the bad.
Oh yeah, by
So like,
far.
yeah, I
Again,
it's
perspective.
fine.
Yeah, perspective. You take any of the Disney stuff that's any of the Marvel stuff that's coming out now, and you put it up against CW, DC shows, and like, which would you rather have? Like,
Yeah,
perspective is a huge thing. So
right. Absolutely. That is without a doubt 100%. Especially with the CW stuff, the only stuff I care about isn't even on CW because it's that You show, which is on Netflix. It's because that's what Greg Berlanti was. So
yeah.
yeah, that's all I care about. You got anything else you want to add about the DC talk?
No,
Well,
my hope is Goyer, but obviously I don't think I haven't heard his name very much, so I don't think that's going to happen.
I feel like when this shakeup first started happening, I think Goyer's name came up at one point. I remember hearing, but it like
Um,
quickly went to like Berlanti, like, and now it's this. I swear I thought I heard Goyer, and Goyer made sense, like
yeah.
in some degree.